Welcome to Middle East Briefing. The content of the briefing includes Israel and US at odds over conflicting visions for post-war Gaza. Yemen, Houthis turning Red Sea into crucial front line. How will this war end? How can the next one be prevented? Divisions over Gaza. Royal World Food Programme as staff confront Cindy McCain. Egypt says it is pushing to accelerate aid delivery to Gaza. Israel and US at odds over conflicting visions for post-war Gaza. Associated Press. The US and Israel have found themselves at odds regarding the future of Gaza following the end of the recent conflict with Hamas militants. Israel seeks to retain a permanent security presence in the region and has proposed creating a buffer zone along its border to keep Palestinians out. However, the US has voiced its support for the internationally recognized Palestinian Authority, PA, which it believes should govern Gaza, and it has repeatedly called for the resumption of peace talks aimed at achieving a two-state solution. The US has also criticized the dire humanitarian conditions in Gaza and called on Israel to protect civilians. The US has said it will allow for a transition period following the end of the fighting, but has warned Israel that it will not accept a permanent reoccupation of Gaza or the redrawing of its boundaries. Yemen, Houthis turning Red Sea into crucial front line. Deutsche Welle. Houthi rebels in Yemen have continued to target commercial ships in the Red Sea and fire ballistic missiles and drones towards Eilat, Israel's southernmost city, in retaliation for the war in Gaza. The Red Sea is a crucial passage for global trade, with around 10% of global trade passing through it annually. The Houthi group said it would carry out their military operations against the Israeli enemy, as well as implementing the decision to prevent Israeli ships from navigating the Arab and Red Seas in support of the oppressed Palestinian people. How will this war end? How can the next one be prevented? Foreign policy. A range of experts were asked two questions about the war between Israel and Hamas. 1. How will the war end? And 2. What should happen after the war ends? Here are some of their responses. Ehud Olmert, former Prime Minister of Israel, believes that the war will continue until Hamas's military capabilities are eliminated. He suggests that after the war, Israel should withdraw from Gaza and allow an international force to rebuild and govern the area for a period of 18 months. Israel should also offer a political horizon for the end of the military campaign, including talks with the Palestinian Authority based on a two-state solution. Zaha Hassan, a fellow at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, predicts that the war will continue for many months as Israel attempts to degrade Hamas's military capabilities. She argues that the international community should impose sanctions on Israel for its violations of Palestinian rights and enforce UN Security Council Resolution 2334, which calls on states to not recognize Israel's changes to the pre-1967 border. Daniel C. Kurtzer, a former U.S. ambassador to Egypt and Israel, suggests that Israel should pursue an alternative strategy against Hamas and stop promising to destroy the organization. He argues that a political horizon should be developed to address post-war requirements and to secure an end to the Israeli occupation. The United States should secure Israel's commitment to stop settlement activities and the Palestinian Authority's commitment to clamp down on violence. Omar Dajani, a former legal advisor to the Palestinian negotiating team, predicts that the international community will fail to provide sufficient aid and assistance to Gaza, leaving Palestinians living in tents and in a desperate situation. He argues that the international community should take tangible action to end Israel's brutal occupation, including imposing sanctions on Israel and using its veto power in the UN Security Council. Diana Batu, a lawyer and analyst based in Haifa, expects that Israel will remain in Gaza and that the international community will provide humanitarian support but fail to address the root causes of the conflict. She argues that there needs to be external pressure on Israel to end the occupation and that Palestinian politics needs to be renewed and unified. Peter Arv Mansour, a professor of military history, predicts that the war will continue for several months and that the IDF will be enmeshed in Gaza for a long time. He argues that the international community should provide reconstruction aid but that more robust aid will not be forthcoming without progress on a peace treaty. Israel needs to agree to the creation of a Palestinian state and the Palestinians need to accept the existence of Israel. Daniel Levy, president of the U.S. Middle East Project, believes that Gaza will be heavily dependent on UN agencies and aid groups and that there will be a residual Israeli military presence. He argues that external pressure needs to be placed on Israel to make decisions on its position toward the Palestinians and that a new international architecture is needed to resolve the conflict. The process should be co-chaired by the United States and China. Divisions over Gaza. Royal World Food Programme as staff confront Cindy McCain. Washington Post. Employees at the World Food Programme, WFP, have accused director Cindy McCain of indifference towards the plight of staff working to feed Gazans. McCain's appearance at an event where an award was given to the Israeli people, as well as her refusal to discuss the use of food as a weapon of war in Gaza, prompted tensions to boil over. Israel last month announced that no electricity, food or fuel would be allowed into Gaza. While some aid has been allowed in, health organizations have argued that the trickle is insufficient. In a video conference, McCain said she would remain neutral, as the UN Secretary-General had not used the terms war and food in relation to Gaza. WFP employees noted that it was common for executive directors to visit conflict zones and criticized McCain for not calling for a humanitarian ceasefire. Following the conference, McCain stated that she had observed a moment of silence for deceased UN workers in Gaza and had paid tribute to WFP staff. Egypt says it is pushing to accelerate aid delivery to Gaza. Reuters. Egypt is working to increase the delivery of aid to the Gaza Strip, after the amount of aid getting through to the region decreased with the end of the Israel-Hamas truce on December 1. Egypt is determined to prevent the emptying of the Gaza Strip, as Israel's military campaign pushes residents southwards towards the border with Egypt's Sinai Peninsula. Egypt believes that Israel's operations in the Israeli-occupied West Bank are aimed at forcing Palestinians towards Jordan. Since the conflict began in Gaza on October 7, the Rafah crossing on the Egyptian border has been the only entry point for aid trucks carrying supplies of food, medicine, water and fuel. The number of trucks crossing daily has dropped to less than 100, compared to nearly 200 when the truce was in place. Egypt, along with the United Nations, has been urging Israel to speed up the inspection process for aid trucks that requires the vehicles to drive to Egypt's border with Israel before returning to Rafah. 2 months of Israel-Gaza war, how divided is the world? Al Jazeera. The recent conflict between Israel and Hamas has led to diplomatic divisions on how to describe the situation and the appropriate terminology to use. The term ceasefire has been preferred by many countries, while Israel's allies have called for a humanitarian pause. The UN Security Council has also been divided, with several resolutions failing to pass due to disagreements. Additionally, countries have been divided on whether to call Israel an occupier and whether to discuss Israel's blockade of Gaza and settlements in the West Bank. However, there is more agreement on the need for a two-state solution and the establishment of an independent Palestinian state. Some countries, including Belize, Bolivia, and South Africa, have suspended relations with Israel, while others have withdrawn their ambassadors. The U.S. has continued to provide strong support to Israel, both diplomatically and militarily. Exclusive, 50 days in Hamas captivity, Thai man recalls beatings and bleakness. Reuters. Anucha Angka, a Thai farm laborer who was captured by Hamas militants on the Israeli border with Gaza, has spoken about his ordeal. Angka was working on an avocado farm near the border when militants burst through the fence and kidnapped him and his colleagues. 2 of the group were killed, including a friend who Anucha witnessed being shot dead. The remaining hostages were forced into a truck and taken to Gaza. The men were held in 2 small underground rooms for almost 2 months. They were beaten regularly and served 2 meals of flatbread a day. The hostages were eventually released and handed over to the Red Cross. Angka is now back in his home country and has spoken about his experience, stating that his ordeal was made even worse by the fact that he was forced to watch the killing of his friend. Rights groups say Israeli strikes on journalists in Lebanon were likely deliberate. Associated Press. Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch have said that 2 Israeli strikes that killed a Reuters videographer and wounded 6 other journalists in South Lebanon nearly 2 months ago were apparently deliberate and a direct attack on civilians, and should be investigated as a war crime. Israeli forces battle Hamas as diseases spread among the displaced. Washington Post. Israeli forces and Hamas militants engaged in street battles across Gaza yesterday, with some of the heaviest fighting occurring in the southern city of Khan Yunis. The city has been designated by Israel as a safe area, but is now a major focus of the fighting. A spokesperson for the Israeli Prime Minister's office said that troops were in close-quarter combat against Hamas terrorists in the Gaza Strip including Khan Yunis, eliminating tunnel shafts and the terrorists operating within them. The UN has called for an urgent end to the fighting to avert a humanitarian catastrophe. Journalists should be allowed in and out of Gaza, says Reporters Without Borders. RFI. Reporters Without Borders, RSF, has called for the Rafah crossing to be opened so that journalists can enter and exit Gaza. The crossing has been closed since Israel declared war on Hamas in Gaza, following the deadliest attack in its history on October 7. RSF states that in 2 months of war, not a single reporter has been authorized to enter the Gaza Strip via Rafah, which clearly undermines the media's ability to cover the conflict. Ladies and gentlemen, I am Dr. Six, your resident observer from the 6 Degrees world, here to bring you the latest news from around the globe. Today, we delve into the ongoing conflict between Israel and Hamas, with a focus on the future of Gaza. Israel seeks to maintain a permanent security presence and create a buffer zone, while the U.S. supports the internationally recognized Palestinian Authority and calls for peace talks. Meanwhile, Houthi rebels in Yemen are turning the Red Sea into a crucial front line, posing a threat to global trade. Experts weigh in on how this war will end and what should happen afterwards, offering diverse perspectives. Tensions rise within the World Food Programme as Director Cindy McCain faces accusations of indifference towards Gazans. Egypt is working to accelerate aid delivery to Gaza, while the world remains divided on how to describe the conflict and the appropriate terminology to use. A Thai man recounts his harrowing experience of being held captive by Hamas militants, and rights groups call for an investigation into Israeli strikes that killed journalists. Lastly, Israeli forces battle Hamas as diseases spread among the displaced, and Reporters Without Borders calls for the opening of the Rafah crossing for journalists to enter and exit Gaza. Now, let's dive deeper into these stories. The conflict between Israel and Hamas continues to create divisions and challenges on many fronts. The U.S. and Israel have conflicting visions for the future of Gaza, with Israel seeking a permanent security presence and the U.S. supporting the Palestinian Authority. This disagreement highlights the complexities of finding a lasting solution to the conflict. In Yemen, Houthi rebels are targeting commercial ships and firing missiles towards Israel, posing a threat to global trade. This further complicates the situation, as it draws more countries into the conflict. The experts' responses on how the war will end and what should happen afterwards offer a range of perspectives. From suggestions of eliminating Hamas's military capabilities and withdrawing from Gaza to imposing sanctions on Israel and pressuring both sides to make political commitments, there is no shortage of ideas. These differing viewpoints reflect the complexity of the conflict and the challenges in finding a resolution that satisfies all parties involved. Tensions within the World Food Programme highlight the difficulties faced by aid organizations in providing assistance to Gazans. The accusations against Director Cindy McCain reveal the deep divisions and sensitivities surrounding the conflict. Egypt's efforts to increase aid delivery to Gaza demonstrate the need for international support in addressing the humanitarian crisis. The diplomatic divisions and disagreements on terminology reflect the struggle to find common ground and a unified approach to the conflict. However, there is more agreement on the need for a two-state solution and the establishment of an independent Palestinian state. This shows that there is still hope for a resolution, even amidst the divisions. The personal account of a Thai man held captive by Hamas militants sheds light on the human cost of the conflict. The experiences of individuals caught in the crossfire remind us of the urgency of finding a resolution to end the suffering. In conclusion, the conflict between Israel and Hamas continues to pose challenges and divisions on many fronts. The differing visions for the future of Gaza and the humanitarian crisis highlight the complexities of the situation. It is crucial for the international community to come together and find a resolution that addresses the root causes of the conflict and ensures the well-being of all those affected. As always, I welcome your thoughts and questions on these issues. What are your thoughts on the future of Gaza? Thank you for tuning in. The content above showcases the latest briefing reports and analytical synopses, thoughtfully curated by the 6 Do team. These insights stem from a wide array of reputable media outlets, think tanks, government sources, and specialized experts worldwide. We encourage you to explore these sources for a comprehensive perspective. Keep in mind that while the content may not always align with the official standpoint of 6 Do Brief, it's not meant to be taken as absolute directives for decision-making. Comprising seasoned media professionals, learned scholars, and accomplished scientists, the 6 Do team embodies a trailblazing, fully independent media entity. To customize 6 Do Brief to meet your professional needs, you have the option to subscribe to a diverse array of briefings on our website, 6dobrief.com. Regardless of your location, you can conveniently receive 6 Do Brief via email.